This is for a 2006 Dodge Stratus, broken upper control arm ball joint, and remove and replace the strut. I am sure that by looking at the upper control arm, it's held on to the strut by 2 bolts, and it's just so tempting to just be able to take those 2 bolts out and undo the ball joint and just remove the top control arm. I just don't see that. For one thing, I have a McPherson strut spring compressor, and the spring is just wound too tight on the strut on the Dodge Stratus that I can't get it on there. But I'm sure that they have some kind of a tool where they can crank that spring down, and I'm sure there's some way they can get those 2 bolts out. And the only way I could see to get this completed was to take the top part of the, knock the bottom of the tail shaft off the strut and just pull the top part of the strut out. And that's what I did. And I learned a lot doing the broken side. And so what I'm going to do is switch from the broken to doing the other side, because like I said, I learned a lot, and I'm going to show you that side, how to do that. So if you don't have an electric or pneumatic impact wrench, while the car's still on the ground, you probably want to loosen up all your lug nuts. Jack the car up and support it with a suitable jack stand. Never go underneath the car with just the jack. So here's the good ball joint on the upper control arm. Well, it's not really good. What happened is when you drive this car over any bumps, you hear this really loud banging noise. And this one's ready to go too. The other one, like I showed you in the pictures before, it just tore right out of it finally just tore right out of the socket. And this one's destined for that to happen too, so I'm going to replace it. You can try to remove the bolt on the upper ball joint. I had to heat it, and what I do is I heat it up with a propane torch, and then I squirt some penetrating oil on it. And what it does is it causes it to, first it expands, and then it rapidly contracts, and also draws in a little bit of the penetrating oil. The one I broke loose without doing this one I had to do that. And hopefully you may or may not have to do that. There's a pinch bolt on the back of the strut that holds the tail shaft on the end of the strut, and you may need to spray the nut with, heat it up and spray it with penetrating oil to loosen it up, and you will need to remove the bolt completely to dislodge the tail shaft. Then I undid the pinch bolt, and I had a wrench wedged in against the on the nut head, and then on the bolt head, and then the nut. I used the impact wrench, and since I'm holding the camera with one hand, getting a ball joint out of the of its recess is to just start banging on it around the outside with a sledgehammer, and a lot of times it'll just pop out. This I had to heat it up and squirt some some penetrating oil on it, and then you can bang. Since I'm not going to reuse this ball joint, you can bang on the ball joint end, and even though you're not going to use it, I always, whenever something's threaded, I'm going to bang on it. I always put the nut on it, whether I'm going to use it again or not. That way I won't have to think, oh, yeah, I'm going to use this. If you just do it every time, then you'll never forget, even if it's something you're going to throw away. So what I ended up doing is banging on the bottom of this. Like I said, put the nut on there so it won't mushroom the end, even though I'm going to throw it away. I do that for every one of them, even if I'm going to throw it away, so I'll never forget. I always put a nut on there, and that way I won't forget. So I just knocked this right out of the recess. So that looks like a nut that I'm hitting, but actually it's the other end of the bolt with the nut on it, so I don't mushroom the end of the bolt. I tried jacking up the lower control arm with another jack to see if that was, if I could take some of the unsprung weight or sprung weight. I don't know which I guess it's sprung weight. We'll just go with that for now, sprung weight. See if I could relieve some of that, and that didn't help. The only way I could get it out was to spin the nut, and I like I said, it's a long nut. I mean, that whole length of it can get probably pretty rusted and cruddy in there, and I don't think you can get any penetrating oil down in there, and it's difficult to heat the whole length, so I think that's the only way you can get it out. And the bolt is it's got knurling along the one side, and I'll show you a better picture of the bolt later, but you're going to have to get hammering on the other end of it, putting the nut on the other end and hammering it. It just doesn't, I don't know, I guess there's maybe rust too. And the only thing I found was to spin it. Like, I used my impact wrench and it broke that knurling through. And once that happened, I could just use a pin punch or something like that and just knock the bolt right out. Now this is a really interesting one. This is the bottom part of the strut, and it connects to the lower control arm. So now it's the fun part. We're gonna knock the tail shaft off the upper McPherson strut, and anywhere along there you can tap on it one side then the other, and it'll slide off pretty easy. It's almost off, and you can go around the rim too and tap around on that, and to get it to slide down. It's completely off. So next, what you want to do is loosen up all the mounting bolts on the top of the shock tower for the McPherson strut, and the one strut bolt is sort of partially back on. It's sort of like under the top lip of the firewall where the hood closes, and if you pull your weather stripping back, there's like a cutout, so you can get your tool in there to loosen up that bolt. Then just pull the strut forward. You might have to shift it a couple times to get it out of the wheel well. And there's the strut removed. And I heated up the nut with propane and then cooled it off with the penetrating oil to get it loose. One note, there's a rubber grommet inside. It's sort of like I guess it's a shock absorber type, piece of rubber. So you don't want to heat it up too hot. You don't want to. You'll start to smell rubber burning, but it doesn't really melt. I mean, it will eventually, but you know, you got to do what you got to do to get it loose. And the penetrating oil is flammable, so it will burn a little bit. If you have any excess, it will burn it off. And this is how bad the ball joint is on the upper control arm. So the passenger side one, the coils are workable. I mean, you can you just keep banging on the shoulder of the bolt head. You can bang it right past one of the coils and put it back. And what I did is I put them in the other way around, so the nuts on the inside, so I didn't have to go through all that to get the bolt past the coils. And like I said, the coils are wound really tight. And I'm sure that there's a Mopar tool somewhere that can just push that spring all the way down, but I don't have it, so that's why I put it back together. And the other side, it's really bizarre because the springs are right in front of the bolt, but I pried on it with a screwdriver and hammered, and I got the coil out of the way enough. I did put my McPherson strut compressor on there, and I think I used that to get one side of the bolt out, but the other one is like flush right in front of the bolt. But you just keep banging on it at an angle, and you'll eventually get the bolt to pop out. And then, like I said, put the bolt in from the other side, and the nut on put the nut on the spring side. I actually had to grind a little bit on the McPherson strut adapter to get it to fit in between the springs. There's the new upper control arm, and it's got the protector to protect the ball joint. Okay, so put everything back together, and you want to hold the the strut up there and match it up and just thread one of the bolts in about 4 or 5 turns, and then another bolt, and then all 4 of them. You don't want to tighten them down, just thread them in. So now you want to put the tail shaft on. Slide the tail shaft onto the bottom of the strut. There's an alignment pin on the back of the strut that fits into a groove on the tail shaft, and you have to get that alignment right because there's a recess, a slight recess, about 1/4 of an inch, the length of the bolt and the width of the bolt in the back of the strut where the pinch bolt goes through, and if you get that off, the strut will be blocking that. You'll never get the bolt through there. Reinstall the pinch bolt. Undo the lock nut and take off the protector on the ball joint. They sent me, for the top ball joint, they sent me 2 different manufacturers. The one on the other side has a castle nut with a cotter pin, and this one has a prevailing nut. Now you got to get the peg through the hole. So what you have to do, I found the easiest way, is to jack up the lower control arm and guide the ball joint, the threaded part of the ball joint, through the top part of the control arm. Then tighten the ball joint nut down. And there's one of the bolts. Like I said, I put them in through the other way. And you know, even the other way around, I don't know how you're going to push the bolt through. I mean, it's so close to the fender wheel well. I don't know. I guess if you release all that tension, compress the spring and undo the ball joint. I guess you could just take something that's got a 90-degree angle in it, or and just push the bolt through. I don't know. Then you have to reattach the bottom part of the strut to the lower control arm. So it's really not that difficult. What happens is it sort of pops forward the 2 parts of the lower tail shaft. It sort of slides forward on the lower control arm, and what happens is, like I said, there was a bushing that sticks out, and those lower 2 forks, they ride on the bushing. So if you try to push them back, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be hitting that bushing. And it won't go any further because it's metal against metal. So what you have to do is you have to get a big prying screwdriver, and you got to pry what I did is I pried the bolt side up first. I pried it up onto the bushing, and then you can tap it with like a sledgehammer. Just keep tapping it around till you get it, circle on circle. And once you got 2 concentric circles of the inner control arm and the outer fork, then you can put the bolt in, and you can start to tap the bolt through, and then The other one may not be completely, and you can, concentric, both the inner and outer circles, concentric, but you can tap it with a sledgehammer and, then tap it a little bit more on the other side. And eventually you get the bolt to go all the way through, and you can say, yippee, and put the nut on, and and that'll be completed. I mean, after you do this, you should have the shock tower. The bolt's not tightened up, so you guys still tighten those up, and that's it. I think that pretty much takes care of everything.